Yes, that's the water out of my well from my house. I'm Ray Kemble from Dimmock, Pennsylvania. I'm an affected landowner and ex-gas worker. The water got contaminated up there by us. This is a pretest from the industry stating there was nothing wrong with the water in my house prior to gas drilling and fracking. This is the report from DEP showing over 27 chemicals now in the water. I like going in the back, uranium-238, 235, 236, uranium-234, 3 grades of thorium, 4 grades of lithium, strontium, manganese, aluminum. I mean, the list goes on of the levels that are ridiculous. Our lovely EPA came in, hand-delivered this document to me after they did their testing. I opened it up, and I turned and I said, where's your scientific proof I want to see from our federal government? You give me a spreadsheet that my 5-year-old grandson could print up on a computer. It tells me nothing. They delivered this report to me on March 13th, 2012. We'll come back and explain it to you, right? Okay. They did. They came back March 20th with this report and hand-delivered it to me. Said, oh, this one's right, the first one's wrong. We need the first one back. Here's the right one. Said, thank you. Get off my property. They changed the levels of the test so it was no longer contaminated on my property. They came back and we all put our waters from our houses, poured the water out from our faucets, and EPA refused to drink it after you sat there and turned around and told us our water was safe to drink and bathe in. Well, I challenge any of you to drink this water from my house right now. It's a bogus. I'm tired of being lied to. Y'all went national on the 22nd of July, said there was nothing wrong with the water in Dimmock, Parker County, or Pavilion. Everything was just hunky-dory fine. Well, now why did you write me this report on July 23rd telling me my water's contaminated? This is from Regional 3, EPA, telling me my water's contaminated. I have a problem with EPA right now. Think you're all lying to me. Matter of fact, I know you're lying to me. I have reports from colleges, Duke's, Yale, everything else, showing diesel fuel and every other type of chemical in the water. The agents came back from EPA, off the record, Ray, don't drink the water, it's contaminated. I said, tell me something I don't know. This is a PowerPoint presentation those agents released to the LA Times showing the water's contaminated and that the test they did in Dimmock is false. I'd love to know why, Dimmock wasn't even put in this new study you did. I really have a problem with that. These are 3 consent orders done by our DEP and Cabinet Oil and Gas stating they contaminated the water in Dimmock due to gas drilling and fracking. I still don't have water in my house. So this time here, I'm tired. I'm tired of being here. I'm gonna hook this water back up in this house, and I want you to live in my house for the next week and using this water and see how you like it. I'm not here asking, I'm demanding EPA does their job and come back in and open these investigations up and tell us the truth. Because we have our own state says it's contaminated. The industry admits they polluted the water due to their gas drilling and fracking. I've been on frack sites and everything else. I worked it for 3 years. Believe me, some of the stuff you're hearing here, don't listen to the industry. Why don't you come up and see it for yourself and see the truth with your own eyes? It's a farce. Illegal dumping, everything that we do, cross-contamination of the trucks, failed wheel concrete right from the get-go. We know it failed, and we still drill the hole, and we still put the well online. There is numerous problems I can't even get to because there's not enough time for me to do all this. All I want is you to come back and do your damn job and tell us the truth. And that's what I want. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kemble. Our next speaker is Mr. Payne.
Given the purpose of this panel, it seems appropriate and perhaps helpful to present my comments in the context of the charge question. To that end, let me begin by stating that I was briefly engaged by Mr. Stephen Lipsky to undertake a review and investigation of the contamination that has affected the residential property that wells on his and neighboring properties in Parker County, Texas. I would like to offer comments related to a number of points in the charge questions, but for brevity, I will stay with charge question 1. The goal of the assessment was to review, analyze, and synthesize available data and information concerning the potential impacts of hydraulic fracturing. Are there topics that should be added to provide needed background for the assessment? Yes. To be concise, Henry's Law. The extent to which Henry's Law and its implications were ignored during sampling and data synthesis and interpretation in the Southern Parker County case was astonishing to me. What was even more astonishing was realizing how widely Henry's Law is ignored in efforts to develop data on methane migration generally. At a basic and fundamentally important level, Henry's Law tells us that given a choice between being dissolved in water and being a free gas, methane will move into the gas phase. Further, methane is the epitome of a nonpolar small molecule in water, the classical polar solvent. It follows that methane dissolved in water will rapidly exsolve whenever conditions permit. This all boils down to the simple realization that collecting a representative sample of water that contains any appreciable amount of methane represents a serious challenge. And the challenge becomes ever more difficult as the methane concentration increases. The open VOA vial sample collection method, often incorrectly referred to as EPA RSK 175, is widely used to collect water samples for methane analysis, including by environmental contractors for Range Resources and the Texas Railroad Commission, and is recommended by numerous other similar authorities in other states. Henry's Law tells us the use of any open vessel to sample for methane in water is probably not a great idea. Still, for many samples with commonly low methane levels, less than 1 or perhaps 2 parts per million, it is very convenient and provides reasonable results. The problem arises when one does not know if the methane levels are low at the time of sampling. In cases where methane migration and related groundwater contamination is possible, it should be assumed that methane concentrations may be elevated and therefore the open VOA vial method is not appropriate. Conversations with EPA personnel confirm that EPA is aware there is a serious sampling methods problem. In the Southern Parker County case, samples collected by Range Resources contractors using open vials indicated methane concentration in the groundwater and samples in the area were no higher than 3 parts per million. Range and the Texas Railroad Commission concluded there was no contamination. However, this presented a bit of a dilemma in that the same well water would sustain a continuous flame and the water wellhead would vent continuously a flare over 1 meter in length, as it still does to this day. If only the relevant authorities had appreciated Henry's Law. Given the choice between a palpable real-world observation of combustible gas coming from the water and a sampling method that should be regarded by theoretical default as unreliable for contaminated wells, the authorities in Southern Parker County chose to go with the unreliable sampling method. As the case progressed, other entities and agents would sample in Southern Parker County using more reliable methods and always find methane in the 40 to 70 parts per million range, fully in accord with Henry's Law and the direct observations of high concentrations of combustible gas. Routinely, by the way, over 85% combustible gas at the Lipsky water wellhead, with somewhat lower concentrations in numerous neighbors' wells. One might ask, what do such details in the Southern Parker County have to do with the EPA assessment report? Simply this. Many state authorities and industry laboratories, and indeed some standard methods publications, explicitly stipulate the open VOA vial sampling procedures to be used when sampling to determine methane in water. The Southern Parker County case clearly has shown that this standard sampling method provides no reliable indication of elevated levels of dissolved methane, even when those levels are very high. That is to say, then, dissolved methane that has been available from much of the previous literature, dissolved methane data that has been available from much of the previous literature, including scientific, industry, or government, especially state sources, probably is collected with the VOA sampling method and hence is at best unreliably informative on when or not methane contamination was or was not present in a given groundwater source. It follows then that the EPA assessment is attempting to discern contamination by looking at methane in water data from a method or related methods effectively blind to the contamination of concern. For the sake of brevity, I will now refer back to charge question 1. In my opinion, one cannot properly analyze data if one does not know the methods used to acquire that data. One cannot meaningfully synthesize data that does not reliably speak even to the presence or absence of contamination, let alone the level. There is much more to be gained from a thorough examination of the science in the Southern Parker County case, and among other things, Henry's Law implication in it.
Mr. Payne, your time's expired, sir. Thank you. Our next speaker is Mr. Hildenbrand.
Hello, thank you for this opportunity. My name is Dr. Zacariah Hildenbrand. I'm here representing Inform Environmental LLC and also the Collaborative Laboratories for Environmental Analysis and Remediation at the University of Texas at Arlington. I'd like to talk a little bit about some of the research that my team has done over the past 5 years, trying to understand the relationship between unconventional drilling and environmental quality. When we're talking about unconventional drilling, we're talking about hydraulic fracturing, the stimulation process. We're also talking about shale acidization, which is using large quantities of volatile acids to dissolve rock and acquire hydrocarbons. And then we're also talking about the sequestration of these waste fluids in underground injection wells. The environmental concerns are numerous. They include concerns over air quality, human health, soil quality, groundwater surface quality, as a result of the use of large quantities of industrial fluids, chemicals, and then obviously the concern about gases. My team has done extensive research in the Eagle Ford Shale, illustrating that flaring stations, for example, are contributing to benzene, toluene, ethylbenzene, and xylene isomers into the air, which are being concentrated into soils. However, I'm going to focus primarily on our latest groundwater research throughout the various shale formations in Texas. In 2011, we did a study which basically found as water wells got closer to gas wells that had been stimulated by hydraulic fracturing, that the concentrations of heavy metal ions increased significantly. We're referring to primarily arsenic, strontium, selenium, and barium. And in some cases, we found the levels of arsenic, which is a highly carcinogenic ion, to be 16 times above the EPA's safe drinking water standard. We followed up with a 2014 study where we collected 550 water well sites from either private water wells or from public water supply wells feeding small townships. And basically, what we found was quite shocking, actually. We screened the water for 15 different metal ions, anions, dissolved gases, and also 40 different volatile organic carbons. As you can see here, I have the analytes that we detected color-coded. We have the ones in red that were above their respective drinking water standards. Benzene was detected 34 times out of the 550 samples above the drinking water standard of 5 parts per billion. And we also found dichloromethane, which is an industrial cleaning agent, to be above the drinking water standard in 121 of the 550 samples. We also detected a number of different compounds, alcohols, chlorinated species, and again, organic solvents, some of which there are no regulated maximum contaminant limit, but again, we are finding these things in a parts per million range. Contaminants of particularly concern, benzene, trichloroethylene, dichloromethane, cyclohexane, and chloroform. These were found in a higher frequency in the counties where there is more unconventional drilling and hydraulic fracturing ongoing. In some cases, these chemicals were found exclusively in the Barnett Shale versus our samples that were collected as control sites outside of the Barnett Shale where there is no stimulation ongoing. As you can see, some of these constituents, benzene, for example, can trigger ALL, acute lymphoblastic leukemia, can also trigger chronic myeloid leukemia. Some of these other things can trigger other blood-borne cancers and a series of other abnormalities and can have a deleterious effect on one's health. Interestingly, is these constituents that we found in the Barnett Shale are the same constituents that we found in our time series analysis in West Texas. We collected measurements before, during, and after the inception of unconventional drilling in this region, and it was only until after drilling had commenced that we were able to find these compounds, particularly dichloromethane and some of these other organic solvents, in the water. It was only after the drilling, and as the water was clean prior to drilling. All of this research has really pointed us into a subsequent time series analysis in Parker County, which I believe commands our undivided attention. In this region, we have found a large amount of volatile organic carbons in higher frequency than any other region that we've ever seen. We've seen explosive levels of gases in the water, which are vented off some of these wells and are also in the dissolved gas form. And we've also found that the dissolved gases in the water have a compositional and isotopic match to the gases being extracted from the nearby gas wells. So from my perspective, this is some of the most conclusive evidence that anyone has ever seen as to whether or not unconventional drilling has affected groundwater. And again, I believe it commands our undivided attention. As a result of this...
Your time's expired, Mr.
Okay.
Hildenbrand, Dr. Hildenbrand.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Ms. Forpeace.
Mr. Chairman, members of the advisory panel, my name is Hope Forpeace. I'm a producer with a nonprofit production company called AK Productions out of California. I have been studying the many cases of hydraulic fracturing contaminating water across the nation for the past 2 years. I've taken trips across the country to many of these sites and met many of the people that are here today talking about the larger cases, but I've also met many other people who would not come forward, who would not allow me to film them, and who will not speak about their water contamination. They live with it, and they pay for their own water because they're afraid to come out and to have to basically be called tree huggers, or if they work for industry, they can potentially lose their job. I also have spoken with many people who are under gag orders because they have gotten settlements with industry. So when the main talking point for the recent draft assessment is that the contamination cases are not widespread or systemic, I believe that we are leaving out a very large data set because there are actually on the ground hundreds of cases that we don't even know about. But we do know about many cases. We know in Pennsylvania that the DEP has found 243 cases. We know even in the neighborhoods that these good people represent in Parker County, in Dimock, Pennsylvania, and Pavilion, that there are many, many cases on the ground. When Steve Lipsky first reported his case, he and one other landowner were the only cases that we knew about in that neighborhood. Now that's up to 10 cases. So we know that the potential is that this water contamination is widespread and systemic. From my perspective as a researcher, researching a film on this subject, it appears to me that what is widespread and systemic is the regulatory capture and the failure of our regulatory agencies to do their job. And the reason is that industry is giving you a lot of blowback, and we see that, and we understand and appreciate that. And it's very difficult to stand up against the gas and oil industry. They're very, very powerful. And that is why these investigations have been ended in Parker County, Pavilion, and Dimock. And it's a difficult thing to watch as an American, this kind of cover-up, this level of cover-up. So when the draft assessment came out, I did approach the EPA and ask why these cases were not included. And the answer was, we're only looking for the potential. What tells you about the potential more than hundreds of cases on the ground? And yet when we go in and look at these cases, you know, the gas and oil industry and the politicians and the political pushback is just way too much for us to even deal with. And because of that, the cover-up is allowing absolutely terrible science to inform us. For instance, everyone here would appreciate that if this bottle, we know that it has 50% methane gas in it, and the lid is on, if I take the lid off, what are the chances that you're going to have a reading of 0 methane at the hole? Virtually none. It's almost impossible. But those are the findings and the readings that were used in Steve Lipsky's case in Parker County. The Railroad Commission is part of this massive cover-up, and they have allowed testing to be used. The only testing that was used in Steve Lipsky's case for that hearing for the Railroad Commission was specious. They had photographs showing the water on fire. They ignored them. That would tell you that the parts per million was at least 28 parts per million, and they allowed range to turn in testing that said 2.3 parts per million. They allowed ambient air testing that had 0 methane, 0 ethane, and some small parts of propane. That's only possible if you're testing at a barbecue store and you're testing, propane tanks. But this testing was allowed to stand, to allow range resources to be found innocent, and year after year, Republican politicians go in front of Congress and testify about how Parker County is a great example of EPA's terrible science. By not including these cases, especially Parker County Pavilion endemic, we are disallowing a data set that's going to give you a very different result than not widespread and systemic. We are planning to have 1 million gas wells across this country to support the global LNG industry. And the impacts on our national water could be absolutely catastrophic, and we are not looking at it. And I'm asking you to be tough, be strong, stand down the political power that is trying to stop this, because it's our nation's water that is at stake, and people's lives are being ruined. And these people are at the edge of their ability to deal with this, as you would be if you were in this situation.
Your time has expired.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Mr. Lipsky.
My name is Steve Lipsky. Again, I'm going to talk past 5 years and 5 minutes is difficult. Here basically you see a picture of when it all started. My well was drilled in 2005, my water well. September 2009, Range Resources drilled approximately underneath my house, about a mile down, but we noticed problems, and then actually we thought our well went dry. PAC Spell Service came out, took this picture, and said it's gas locking, and this is where it started. Called everyone, found out the Railroad Commission was responsible for coming out. Railroad Commission, the Range Resources, these were actually pictures here of my water on fire, and the vent on fire. The vent's always open. These are all pictures. That's a water truck delivering my water. These are pictures over the last 5 years. They're actually in date order, so you can see it's like Old Faithful. Water lights, vent lights every time. Anyone's more than welcome to come out and view it for themselves, because they call it a hoax. Range Resources, basically when they did their testing in 2011, you can see on here, they said the results showed that my water is safe to drink and there's no danger in my home. But if you look at page 2 here, they say that in my headspace, that's a foot down, 2 feet down from the vent, that they also claim has a 0 rating, has almost 500,000 parts per million of methane. That's 10 times explosive limits. Like again, going back to Henry's Law, that's impossible. Their math doesn't add up. Second of all, again, another letter from them, basically going to my attorney saying that water well is safe and I can use it. Again, in the Railroad Commission hearing, they also talk about faults. The gray area is my area. They said there's absolutely no faults in my area. This documentation all here is decades before they drilled. I have other evidence another company left the area because of the faults or would not even drill. In 2014, this is the Railroad Commission came back in again. This is the company who did the testing for them. If you see here, I zoomed in, and it says that one of the reasons they did this test the way they did it is because my water well was significantly effervescent to use this method. Okay, we all know that effervescing means it is, if you look on here, dissolved methane, this is actually from the OSGS, that it has reached saturation. Reaching saturation, again, means it has to be a minimum of 28 milligrams per liter, and this is, again, the same point that will light on fire, and this is a point also that you need, again, you have some, basically some serious risk here, which we know my water, again, has to be at least over 28. We have done testing with Duke Universities and Isotech, which ranges between 50 and 70. Some of the highest readings they ever got in any residential well. This actually here is, again, from the Railroad Commission. This is Barry Smitherin, given to Congress in June 6, 2012, saying that I attempted to extort $6.5 million from Range. Again, this is another one from David Porter in 2014, saying everything Mr. Lipsky is completely fraudulent stunts. Okay? Testimony that they're giving, and no one's saying anything about it. And what I want to get to next is the OIG report. Basically what they have here is they're saying that Region 6, they had a reason to issue the emergency order because it was real and they felt Range did it. But they also had a reason to withdraw it, and that is that, number one, that they couldn't, the cost factor, they couldn't take on the industry. How can I? Two is they reduced it because they're saying basically I hooked up my own water supply so I was no longer at risk. Three is Range City agreed to participate in a study, which they didn't. And four is they agreed to test 20 water wells in Parker County for 3 months. All but mine. No testing of mine afterwards. Again, at this point, I'm done. I don't know what to do. I feel that the EPA abandoned me. I'm being sued by Range Resources for saying that they did it. Well, I thought they did. I was told by my government they did. And at this point, I'm being called a hoax, a liar, and that my water is safe. And the EPA has not come back and confirmed that if they're correct or not. At this point, I have no choice. I'm not crazy. I am going to go ahead December 1st and hook the water back up to my house. I feel that either the EPA will have to legally, if they feel there is a problem, step in and do something about it. If they don't, that tells me that they feel that they did make a mistake when they issued this emergency order, and the industry and the Road Commission is correct. And again, I just want to move on with my life. I don't want to come here again. I don't want to be here today. This has ruined my life for the last 5 years. It ruins my family's life. And again, I just want to move on. I don't want to ever come back here again. And again, I just like to get this over with. And if my water's safe, then we'll move on and we'll see what happens. If it's not, I'll do what I can to protect my family. But Range Research, the EPA, again, if they think there's something wrong with the water, they need to step forward and do something about it. And again, if not, they need to apologize to me, the River Commission, and Range Resources for letting this all start in the first place. Again, I'm being paid to say my water does not light on fire. Anyone can come down at any time, it does. And actually here, I'll show you one thing I forgot to show you. This is just taken 4 days ago. This is actually video footage of a water jug of my water that we're just putting in. And this would be the same thing if I believe it would be in my shower, because I have a small shower with the door closed. This is just the water lighting on fire. This is, it's not a hoax. You can come and see it. I know my time is up.
Your time is expired,
again, you can
Mr.
see this
Lipsky.
here, but thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Lipsky.
Never be here again.
Our next speaker is Mr. Fenton.
John Fenton, Pavilion, Wyoming. I have very mixed emotions about everything that goes on with this, and one of the biggest things for us is that we tried for years and years and years to get the state of Wyoming to come and listen to the problems that we were having, and we're constantly met by excuses of not having money or manpower or scientific knowledge. So therefore, when we actually got EPA to come in and agree to do a groundwater study, we were very excited that we got some knowledge and some people that were trained to specifically look at the issues that we were dealing with. We had people come and actually do data collection. They actually came and did their jobs. And it was amazing to see the process in action, that we felt like we were being represented finally. Now, when conclusions come out that are controversial or that the powers that be don't agree with, it causes problems, and that's exactly what happened with us. When the EPA came forth with data stating that we did have reasons to be concerned about the water in our area and that it could be potentially from hydraulic fracturing, the boom was lowered on us. The state of Wyoming and the oil and gas industry went to war with the Environmental Protection Agency and with the people who live there, and the EPA folded. It wasn't the EPA out of Region 8, the people who had done all the work. It was directly from the Obama administration. And we were left in the hands of a state-run investigation that admittedly by Governor Matt Mead was being funded by Encana Oil and Gas, the very people who we suspected may have improperly drilled the wells in our area. So we're back to looking after ourselves again, which we'd been for years, and trying to muddle our way through this and not only run ranches and farms and lives and try to build something of a future, but be scientists and lawyers and politicians and learn all these things that, I'll be quite honest with you, I never wanted to learn in the first place. And so we're left in the hands of the state of Wyoming, who just recently passed Senate File 12, and I included this in my evidence that I presented on the record, which now potentially makes it illegal for us to even collect data on public property. When in this country did the people charged with looking after the citizens and the well-being of everyone be emasculated by a company whose job it is to make a profit? Why are we left in the hands of the people who caused our problem? Why, in this investigation, was there not more of scientists on the ground doing what scientists do, collecting data? I quite frankly, if I hear frack focus one more time, I think I will become physically ill. It's a website that reports chemicals that everybody knows, the basic chemicals, the rest are exempt. How can we sit here and say that a whole industry that is exempt from our major regulatory statutes to protect the environment can possibly do anything safe? If it was safe, they wouldn't need to be exempt from the rules. I really encourage you to do more than review industry's data. This has to be an on-the-ground study. In the meantime, think of all the hundreds and thousands of people that live with this every day. Within 4-mile radius of our home, we have 200 fracked wells. This is not just new wells, and the state of Wyoming has a long history of oil and gas production. They're fracking old infrastructure. It's not just horizontal shale wells. It's coal bed methane. It's vertical tight sands. There's all these things that just don't seem to matter. And quite frankly, I'm tired of being here too. I always wanted to bring my children to Washington, D.C. and show them around and give them an idea of what this country was founded on. And quite frankly, that's the last thing I want to do now. I've completely lost faith in the system. This has to be more inclusive with the people who are directly impacted, not just the people who are making profit from this.
Thank you, Mr. Fenton. Our next speaker is Mr. Davis.
He's unable to attend.
If Mr. Davis is not here, our next speaker is Mr. Stevens.
Didn't catch a glimpse of that earlier from everybody. There's raised water again. Good afternoon. I'd like to begin by reminding you all of the U.S. EPA mission statement. The mission of EPA is to protect human health and the environment. All Americans are protected from significant risk to human health and the environment where they live, learn, and work. National efforts to reduce environmental risk are based on best scientific information. Federal laws protecting human health and the environment are enforced fairly, effectively. Fail, 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 and fail. My name is Craig Stevens, and I'm a 6th-generation landowner in Silver Lake Township, Pennsylvania. I'm here to discuss the EPA study on hydrofracking that has been 5 years coming. Can I convey how disappointed I was that the EPA chose to tell the world in your press release hydraulic fracturing activities in the U.S. are carried out in a way that have not led to widespread systemic impacts on drinking water resources? Are you promoting or regulating this industry? I would ask this body of science professionals, what is your definition of widespread or systemic? The population of Susquehanna County is 45,000 people, and to put it in context, an epidemic is 1 in 1,000, or 45 cases out of 45,000. And a pandemic is 1 in 100, or 450 cases out of 45,000. In Demick, Pennsylvania, 33 water wells were contaminated in one single day. I have documentation from our own Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection that shows hundreds of cases of water contamination determined after full investigation that states quite clearly the cause. Your private water well has been found to be contaminated by natural gas drilling in your area. These documents represent all 33 drilling counties in the Commonwealth. When the EPA spent 6 months endemic from January 2012 to June 2012 testing water, they had a chance to tell the world the truth. But sadly, it was politics as usual. The EPA's own agents made it clear that the water was poisoned, and the investigation was initiated because the ATSDR found some alarming water test results data there. I have reviewed the EPA budget history for the past 46 years, and from 2008 to 2015, your budget was $8 to $10 billion a year with a workforce of 15 to 17,000 employees. The American public looks at this kind of investment in the largest regulatory agent on earth as a huge financial drain that is only worthwhile if you do your jobs and protect us. We, the people, are considering your oversight of this practice a failure, and the practice leaving us at the mercy of the individual state governments has been an abject failure. I am the son of a 63-year emergency first responder. My father had a saying, when you mix politics with health and safety, nobody survives. Stop playing politics with us. We don't need another misleading study. We need action from the EPA. In our communities, we are suffering horribly because of you refusing to do your jobs. My water began tasting like metal in March of 2013, and after 2 weeks I started having spontaneous nosebleeds, 8 over 2 weeks. They stopped when I ceased drinking my water. I called Pennsylvania Department of Health, and they had me call Pennsylvania DOH, who took my name and number 5 times over 2 weeks, but failed to return a call as promised. This is unacceptable. In Pennsylvania, they started with 1,000-foot presumed liability. Then in 2012, they increased it to 2,500 feet. But when you asked to show the scientific basis for these distances, there was none. We're not interested in being a part of this public health experiment. I asked this body to come and see it, come and drink it, and come and breathe it, and tour the affected area. We've had thousands of people come and tour our area over 6 years from all over the world to evaluate it themselves. We are sharing the devastation, with others as they will not continue to allow our community to be sacrificed for the oil and gas industry. I ask you to look at the oil and gas industry's financial situation. They're in massive debt and are on the verge of collapse, laying off workers. Who do you think is going to be stuck cleaning up this mess? It is health that is real wealth, not pieces of gold and silver. Gandhi. The only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men and women to do nothing. Sir Edmund Burke. Please use the science, including your own agency's investigations in the 3 communities across the country where water was contaminated, and share the truth, what is going on in this industry across the country. Then EPA will be doing its job. Last thing I'll say, Martin Luther King, on some positions, cowardice asked the question, is it safe? Expediency asked the question, is it politic? Vanity asked the question, is it popular? But conscience asked the question, is it right? This is not right, you all know it, and we're tired of generational suicide. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Stevens. Our next speaker is Mr. Gulla.